As young people work out who they are, separate to, yet connected with their family of origin, conformity presents as a really big issue. Conforming to an accepted social or moral code is not a bad thing. But it's generally not this type of conformity that most strikes us as we grow up. It's conforming to ideas of what looks normal or what might give us power or agency within a group. It's the struggle of the little girl who's told she's not in the popular girls group because her clothing doesn't conform to their ideas of fashion, or the one who agonises over her body shape when she's just 7 or 8. It's the struggle of the boy who is placed lower in the hierarchy of a group and treated accordingly, while other boys who are more physically advanced or who excel at a particular sport or who are more confident with girls take their place at the top of the group among its so-called alpha males. Or the one who's labelled as effeminate and somehow less than because he's not interested in conventional boys' stuff. Conformity of this kind, based on the way we look or on things we cannot do much about, can be crippling. How pleasant, writes the psalmist today, when brothers and sisters live together in unity. Unity, not uniformity. And certainly not a social conformity, where that conformity is far less about submitting to a moral connection based on mutual compassion and far more about establishing formulas where hierarchies give power to some and strip it from others. Some years ago, I came across the storybook by Rev'd Clement called Feathers for Phoebe. It tells the story of Phoebe, an ordinary little grey bird who feels unlovely and unnoticed, and she longs to conform because that is the way she feels she might find a place to belong. I'm going to share that with you now. Feathers for Phoebe. Phoebe was small and grey, and she didn't like it, not one little bit. I want to be noticed. I want to stand out in a crowd. I want to look like you, Phoebe told Zelda. Of course you do, Zelda replied. Zelda was beautiful. Zelda was talented. Zelda was famous. Zelda ran the most popular beauty salon in the forest. Where do I start? Asked Phoebe. At the top, darling, always at the top. You need a crest, a brand new crest. Something bright, something big, something marvellous. Here, have a look at the samples and tell me what you like. No. Maybe, no. Maybe, no. Yes, said Phoebe. Marvellous, said Zelda. Marvellous. No one's ever asked me for this one before. Wow, said Phoebe. Wow, said Zelda. So much colour. Determined to show off her new look, Phoebe flew backwards and forwards through the busiest part of the forest, but no one stopped to stare. I need something more, thought Phoebe. Darling, the crest is a start, but it's not enough. You need a tail, Zelda exclaimed. Something long, something elegant. You decide. No. Maybe. No. Yes, said Phoebe. Beautiful, darling. It'll go perfectly with your new crest. Phoebe's new tail did go perfectly with her new crest, but it did not go perfectly with anything else. It was so long she could barely get off the ground. The only heads she turned were the ones she whacked as she flew by. I need something else to set off the tail, said Phoebe. Of course you do. You need wings, said Zelda. The choice was huge. Take your time, darling. Wings are everything. No. Maybe. Yes, said Phoebe. Wonderful, said Zelda. With these wings, you will shine like the morning sun. Phoebe's new wings looked stunning. It was just a pity she couldn't use them. "No flying, darling," said Zelda. "They're just for show. From now on, you walk." Walking wasn't easy. It was difficult to turn or lift her head, and down on the forest floor she wasn't sure if anyone saw her at all. "It's your chest and back," said Zelda. "The grey cannot stay. It has got to go." "You choose," Phoebe told Zelda. "Choose anything you like, so long as it's fabulous." No, fabulous. No, fabulous. "Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous," exclaimed Zelda as she added the last fluffy feather to Phoebe's new chest. "You've finished, darling. The old Phoebe is gone. The new Phoebe has arrived." Taking care to avoid thorns, spiderwebs, prickly leaves and snagging branches, Phoebe climbed a low-hanging vine and began parading up and down, but no one called out to her, and no one stopped for a closer look. "I have a crest, a tail, feathers every colour of the rainbow, but still no one notices me," moaned Phoebe. "Sometimes feathers are not enough, darling. You need much more," said Zelda. "You need a song, a sound, anything, so long as it's loud. And then you will need some moves." "Some moves?" asked Phoebe. Moves that show off your tail, your crest, your shiny new wings. I like to puff out my chest, fan out my tail, wriggle my rump and sing, ging, gang, gooly, 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 wash, wash, ging, gang, goo. But remember, this is my song and these are my moves. You need your own," said Zelda. Phoebe spent the rest of the day trying things out. Bada bing, bada boom, bada bing, bang, boom, no. Tum tum tee, tum tum, no. Ticka ticka cha cha, ticka ticka choo, ticka ticka, yes. Then she tried prancing and dancing, whirling and twirling, nodding and bobbing until finally she came up with the perfect moves for the perfect grooves. The all-new, singing, dancing Phoebe was now ready to show herself to the world. Very slowly and very carefully, Phoebe climbed to the top of the tallest tree. She stood on one leg, shook her tail, flicked up her crest, slowly flapped her wings and began to sing. Ticka ticka cha cha, ticka ticka choo, ticka ticka cha. No one noticed. Ticka ticka cha cha, ticka ticka choo. Still, no one noticed. Ticka tick. Phoebe's claw slipped off the branch. Clunk! Her head hit a vine, ripping off her new crest. Crash! She fell through an old hawk's nest, pulling off her new wings. Thunk! She collided with a sleeping lizard, which yanked off her new tail. Thud! Phoebe landed smack bang on top of another bird. They stood up, a little dazed and a little dusty. Two birds, no fancy crests, no shiny wings, no long, elegant tails, just two small, grey birds. "Sorry," said Phoebe. "I fell." "I know. I caught you," said the other small grey bird. You did," said Phoebe. "Sort of." "I'm glad," said the other small grey bird. "So am I," said Phoebe. "Wow," said the other small grey bird. "You sure know how to get noticed." And that is Feathers for Phoebe. How pleasant, writes the psalmist, when brothers and sisters live in unity. They're not wrong, but unity is difficult to achieve because unity does not preclude difference. Rather, it encompasses it and it accepts it. Look at Joseph and his brothers in Genesis 45. The story has a complex history. Joseph is sold by his brothers into slavery, as we saw in last week's reading. But this week, there is reconciliation. The sons of Israel have matured. They are family men with an aged parent, and they have a need for food in a famine that has driven them to a land where it is hoped that their differences will be overlooked and they will get the food that they need. They do not expect to find that their brother Joseph is now a leader and is in charge of the nation's food security. Joseph, it seems, with age has mellowed too, though power is once more on his side of the equation, and he's still not beyond teaching them a lesson, planting evidence to make his brother Benjamin look like a thief. Nonetheless, he weeps, we're told, loudly when he reveals his identity. "Come closer to me," he says to his brothers, and they came closer, and he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." In these words, Joseph explains that God has shown him the reason for all past hardships and forgiven. They move to Egypt, where their security is assured. Their differences don't matter anymore. They are unified in a common purpose to live, indeed to flourish. In the gospel today, we see further challenges to the concept of unity. Jesus begins by laying out a critique of the rules to which the religious and legal leadership of his day seem firmly wedded. The unbending nature of these rules, in this case about the washing of hands, requires a high degree of conformity. Not to conform is to exist outside community. Yet Jesus speaks strongly against such conformity. He talks of the hypocrisy and lovelessness of a narrow interpretation of who is clean and who is not. And then, in the next breath, he rejects the request of a desperate mother because, as a Canaanite woman, she's not Jewish. I know a range of scholarship exists dealing with the latter part of this story today because it seems not entirely in character with a saviour who makes the Samaritan the hero of a parable. Jesus tended to be compassionate toward the outsider, the great unwashed. So what's going on? Why does the woman have to grovel to belong? One commentary suggests that there is something of a contrast here that is deliberate. God's people are not just the ones who conform to the rules, but any whose actions show faith in God incarnate. I wonder if, as I said, the gospel writers' motives are to offer that deliberate contrast, showing us the ever-widening circles of God's grace. Unity in God is not limited to conforming to rules or being born to a certain group. Living in community, like life in a family, is hard work. It is good to live in unity, but perhaps we do not examine what it requires, swapping it easily for conformity or uniformity. It's much easier, after all, if we all look the same, think the same, do the same thing, and speak the same language. But it is love that is the heart and soul and nature of God, and so it should be the heart and soul and nature of humanity. Love is difficult, precisely because it isn't self-centered and it celebrates unity, a coming together because of and in spite of our differences to be God's various children. Once more, we are reminded that it is our capacity for love, hope, forgiveness, and faith that is critical, not our ability to be birds of a particular kind of feather. Phoebe finds herself at the end of Rod Clement's story understood and seen. When she is finally true to herself, she's made to be true to herself. Her wings are quite literally clipped beforehand. She's unable to fly while she remains bound by Zelda's ideas of what is acceptable and fabulous and wonderful and what isn't. Her authenticity, her honesty is important, not her conformity to artifice and certain rules of belonging. What do we encourage as a community of faith? Do we want those who come through our doors to conform to certain rules or ways of being that we might apply? Or do we strive to do what Paul asks in the letter to the Romans? Do not conform, he writes, to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing and perfect will. May we be transformed daily by God's grace, so that we too might live in unity as brothers and sisters, children of the living and loving God. Amen.